a long time, and then moved to North Carolina on Halloween, of all the strange days to move. And so I've missed you all for a few months, and I'm very glad to be back. And thank you for asking me to be here, Nikki. If you don't know me, I'm a clinical pharmacist. I'm board certified in geriatrics. That's my deep interest in GAIN and all the great things that you all are doing. I've spent decades, I guess, of my career in academia, teaching mostly pharmacy students, but also physicians and nurses and physical therapists and physician assistants and various healthcare providers, and then practicing mostly in outpatient clinics, often serving the underserved in different parts of the country. And so it was a pharmacy school. It was Notre Dame that brought me to Maryland, almost 13 years ago now. And after that school kind of got up and going and everything was good, I saw this need and I just felt like I had to get in there and see what I could do to do something. And the need that I saw was that people that were ending their primary career and heading into what comes next, whether that's a traditional retirement or looking for new opportunities or whatever that is, I saw a number of those people laying in hospital beds with things that had changed, meaning that their life was going to be forever altered based on this health thing that had happened, and it was completely preventable. And I didn't see that our current healthcare system was doing a lot or enough to identify those risk factors and prevent those heart attacks, those strokes, those severe anxiety and depression episodes that were often coming when people almost like lost their sense of self when they retired or found out that they hadn't taken good care of themselves and suddenly their health was declining. So that's what my life is about now. And it's hopefully kind of makes sense why I'm so interested in people figuring out how to stay healthy in these COVID times, because my goodness, we've got so many variables making this difficult. It's hard to stay up. Think about how hard it was to keep up with life before COVID. And now add all of these variables. I'm finding that a lot of people are not holding it all together as well as they could, myself included. I don't mean to sound like I've got it figured out, but I've learned a lot along the way, just talking to people, keeping an eye on the science and the literature that's coming out. So those are the kinds of things that I'm glad you invited me to come and talk about today. So let me see if I can share my screen. All right, can everybody see that? I wanted a bright, happy color to wake us up this morning and kind of think about this. So we're going to think about COVID, but in the context of maintaining those positive forward thoughts and staying healthy in spite of all that's going on. So I really do. I want everybody to take a deep breath, stretch if you need to, get your day started. I have a question for you. When you think of the word hope, I just want you to take a few seconds and what comes to mind when you think of hope? And nothing like sun and waves to kind of stimulate your thoughts.
Peace.
Like, anybody else have any thoughts that they want to share?
Things will get better.
Mm-hmm.
Better days.
Better days, yeah.
How about when you think of well? Because we're all telling each other, stay well, be well, hope you're well. What does that mean?
Well, I think for me, it's have your brain, just to stay sane actually today.
Yeah.
I think it means to also be physically, but also mentally and emotionally well.
Yeah, definitely. Any other thoughts?
Balance, perhaps. I agree with what Heather said. Basically, it's the whole package. You want somebody to hang in there, and I want to see them tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah. Here's one you might not get asked very often. Have you thought about your purpose? And are you currently living your purpose?
I do feel like I am, just because organizationally we spend a lot of time kind of talking about the mission's what drives us.
Mhm. And then I would challenge you. Go ahead. Yes, I'm sorry.
I would agree with what Nicole said too. Purpose, while it may be difficult, is still fulfilling. And for me, that's what it is. It's all about being fulfilled.
Yeah.
And I'm one of those retired people who has made a point of maintaining purpose. I had 30 years in the field, have a lot of knowledge of aging, and have continued to be involved. I serve as co-chair of a statewide organization that works on legislative issues that relate to low to moderate income seniors. And that has been a really big, given me a continued sense of purpose. So I think that that's something that people can think about, is how even now you can think about what you consider to be your purpose and find ways to continue to be involved.
Yeah, well stated. Thank you, Carol. So now my challenge is to pull all this together into hopefully a cohesive thought throughout this presentation. So as Heather said, health is so much more than do you have COVID or do you not, or have you broken your leg or do you have diabetes? So much more. And so there is that physical aspect. There's mental health. That is everything from mental health diagnoses to episodic mental health difficulties, which I am having trouble finding anyone right now who's not experiencing some of that. Social health, you've heard me say this before. I hate that we called it social distancing rather than physical distancing, because socially, it's important for us to stay together now, probably more than ever. Our emotional health, I think of that as sort of how do you ride the roller coaster? Are you extreme highs and lows? Something great just happened, something terrible just happened? Or have you found a way to kind of stay a little more balanced in the middle of all of that? And then spiritual health, even if you don't think of yourself as a spiritual or religious kind of person, we're spiritual beings. And there's literature that I find fascinating that if any of the 5 of these is out of whack, that our overall health, we're just not feeling like our best selves. So it's important to keep it all in mind. And I think it was Noel said balance. It kind of reframes balance a little bit. How do we think about staying healthy while thinking about all of these things? So another way to think about this is that there's our biological health. That's kind of like that physical health, but that is very much impacted. And I think that's what we sometimes don't realize, very much impacted by our psychological health. And our psychological health is very impacted by our social health, having those people around us that sustain us. And all of that is enveloped within our spiritual health, however we define that for ourselves. And what that means is when you think about our 3 basic human needs, one is we need that purpose. We need to know, why are we here? What are we here to do? What's my life about? Why should I get up in the morning? And we need to know that we are worthy and that people love us, and kind of we need to be reconciled with one another. We need to have someone to love, and we need people to love us. And I know some of you are thinking this is so woo-woo, this is out there, but it's the way we're designed. These are, when you get down to the guts of it all, These are the three things that are most important for our long, healthy life. So thinking about putting it in the context of where we are today, I found it interesting that especially all of you with younger kids, you were probably seeing this before COVID was on our radar screen. There was more and more data coming out about the negative impact of everything from little kids to young adults and the amount of screen time they were getting, whether it was the amount of sort of TV and such that was shaping their thinking, but especially the social media stuff, and that was directly impacting the mental health of these kids. Well, I think now we've had quite the experiment to say that's true of all of us, no matter your age. Too much screen time, especially negative, noisy kind of messaging into your brain, is definitely negative for your mental health and your emotional health. And so one thing to think about is how much media, whether it's Netflix or the news or talk shows or whatever, how much media are you taking in? How many hours per day are you spending? And now we've got smartphones that track that for us, but also the timing. How do you start your day? Do you get up and allow yourself to sort of plan and think and dream big and think really positive thoughts? Do you have, I don't know, music or reading, things that you read or something that brings a positive element to your day before you jump into the noise? And then what about before bed? Or we're going to talk about that a bit, but trying to shut it off before you try to actually relax and go to bed. And then for all of the noise, what are you doing to balance that with more positive things? Because there's great, you can draw these arrows any direction you want to. When we're anxious, pain hurts worse. And when we're in pain, we don't sleep worth a darn. And when we don't sleep, we don't handle anxiety at all. And so this wheel just goes round and round and round. So what are those things you can bring in to sort of calm the crazy, the way you're, I don't know about you, but the thoughts in here can just go all sorts of directions that raise my anxiety level, that start this wheel. So what can you do to kind of quiet all of that? And one place to nip this in the bud is the sleep element. So just a few things. One thing that has been helping people is to shut down. Don't watch the news right before bed. I know for a lot of people that's been their life, a long time habit, but try to not watch the news or anything that's in that noisy sort of negative element within 2 hours of bed, and figure out what can you do that really quiets your mind and quiets your body. One is make sure that you're moving during the day, especially right now when it's cold and gray and snowy, and it's easy to sit on the couch all day or sit at your desk all day, but trying to purposefully move, because that tells your body and mind that this is daytime, we are moving, we are active, and then nighttime feels different. So you can kind of shut down and go to sleep. And then just what relaxes you. For some people, it's a hot shower, a hot bath, or a chamomile tea, or some sort of sound that helps. If you've never tried these before, I encourage you to go to your search engine and look for white noise and pink noise and brown noise. And that it's sort of going to be like a shh kind of noise. For many people, they're finding that shuts down all the thoughts in their head. It gives their brain something else to think about, and that allows them to relax. So think about if you're having trouble sleeping, sleep is critical, I think, more right now than ever. It's important for your overall immune system. And as we saw, for your ability to manage all the noise and the anxiety and the pain. And so think about strategies to be really purposeful to enhance your sleep.
Michelle,
Yes.
are you finding, or have you found during this year, that more people are using more prescription and non-prescription medications to assist them in all of these things?
See my red sentence? I discourage the use of meds to sleep, because the sleep you get is going to be so different. You're not going to feel as rested, and for many of the meds that are out there, you're going to feel really groggy the next morning. And so rather than have good, solid sleep that takes you, remember all the cycles of sleep and takes you down to those deep cycles where you actually really get rested, you don't get there with most of the sleep medications. And we're all interested in senior adults. Anything that contains Benadryl or diphenhydramine, which is most of the over-the-counter sleep medicines, they either have that or its cousin, doxylamine. Those medicines are some of the biggest culprits of middle of the night falls, because most of us have to get up at some point and go to the bathroom, or for some other reason we get out of bed, and man, you've got that medication in your system and you're up at night and it's dark and you're not really awake. That's where the really terrible falls happen, where major bones are broken. So I really discourage the use of sleep medicines and encourage the use of these other things. And I've got a whole sheet of other sleep tips if anyone is interested in those. So I want to explain it a different way, because I have to explain things. And so when you think about the two big elements in our lives right now, stress and fear. Has anyone experienced this? Stress eating and stress drinking? A very funny story. I actually got dressed up in dress clothes the other day and went to a meeting. It hasn't happened in so very, very, very long. And I couldn't button my pants. I didn't even think about it ahead of time. And I was on the road, so I didn't have another pair with, that was terrible. So lots of stress eating. Poor coping skills. Anybody feel like maybe even if they kind of coped with life before, they've been challenged during this season to cope with everything that's coming at you? Anger. Has anyone found that their fuse is a whole lot shorter than it used to be? Little bitty things can really set you off where you wouldn't even have noticed them maybe before. And then we've talked about the impact of sleep. So when all of these things are going on, then that tends to raise our blood pressure. Maybe we don't even realize it. If you have means to check your blood pressure, I encourage you to do so, because I think for most everybody, it's just sort of inching up these days. And these sorts of changes in habits are going to cause our weight to go up. And when our weight goes up, then our risk of diabetes goes up. And as our weight goes up, our blood pressure goes up, we are not feeling so great. We're just sort of closing in on ourselves. Then chronic pain conditions are much more likely to happen. And we know that when we're in chronic pain, that's just going to drive the stress and going to drive the fear. And so this is the pattern that, as I'm talking to people, that I'm finding more and more caught up in. And so their health is just sort of going downhill, either quickly or slowly, but going downhill during all of this. For an organization there in Maryland, I did a survey back in the summer. So COVID was still a fairly new thing. And we were surveying people on how COVID was impacting them. And at that time, people were going to the gym more because they were working from home, but the gyms were still open. They were eating better, spending more time as a family. They were, many people were taking advantage of not being on the road, driving back and forth, and turning that into good, positive, healthy things. I would love to give that survey again, because I kind of doubt for most people that those positive changes sustained. I'm hearing more that, with kids at home and trying to do school, with not having those interactions with people where you could, if you're having conflict with a coworker, back in the olden days, we could talk to each other. You could like dip into their office or go out and grab lunch together and talk it through. That's hard to do over Zoom. And so the people I'm working with seem to be struggling more and more in all of this. So I don't mean to bring us down as we're going to a negative place. So there's hope. There are ways to make this better. One of those is, these are the things that the literature, again, studies, even before COVID, showed these are the things that just make you feel better, actually help you live longer, improve your overall health, and boost your immune system, which is what we all need right now with this virus going around. So one is that engagement, really, but kind of deeply engaging with people, maintaining your optimism. And that's where having the more positive thoughts to start your day can really help get you the optimism you need to get through the day rather than dive right into the difficult stuff. Supportive friends and family. You might be a little bit tired with some of the friends and family that are inside your house. So as much as you can, finding those people that build you up and make you feel good, those people that'll make you laugh, and those people that will tell you that all is going to be okay. That ability to bounce back. And again, a lot of that comes from putting as much positive in as you're allowing the negative to come in. Conflict management skills, I don't think any of us are born with those, but there are a lot of ways to develop them. And being in the positions that you all are in, you've probably developed a lot of good skills over time. And again, the literature shows that those who have a belief in some sort of higher power tend to have overall more hope. But all of these things kind of feed in to the idea of that hope. And that hope is what helps us to feel a lot better and gives us more stamina, if you will, to get through these crazy times. So the negative and the noise seeps in. It feels like it's hard to avoid it. So how can you purposefully bring in these other elements? I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the ways that we can do that, things that have been shown to help us take care of ourselves. So I've talked about sleep a lot. Avoiding your triggers. Who are the people or the things that kind of set you off? And knowing that, I mean, there are probably some people that set you off, but how do you respectfully have just enough time with them, but really fill your time with the people that don't push your buttons? Movement, stretching, strengthening. We want to keep our bodies moving, and it is so easy to sit in one place right now. Think about music and what music lifts you up. I have discovered that you can go to YouTube or someplace and you can just get hours of piano music or acoustic guitar music that's just beautiful, that kind of is in the background. And I find, for me anyway, it's very calming. Being out in nature, spring is truly coming. And so there'll be more and more comfortable nature time. But even now, if you like to play in the snow, it's a great way to just sort of tell your brain it's daytime, we're having fun. We're going to be outside and breathe some fresh air for a while. Relaxation, purposefully relaxing, surrounding yourself with good support, and then the conflict management. When you think about the relaxing, that's another place where there are a number of things out there to kind of guide you through ways to quiet your brain and allow you to relax. And so if you've not experienced that before, maybe just investigate some of those and find the ones that really do help you just shut it all down for a little bit and truly relax every piece of your being. When the doors open, their day is going to come when we are going to come back and interact with one another more. And I know some of you are living this right now, and I'm so grateful for you reaching out to the people. Let me get there in a second. Weight gain and stress effects. I think we're all feeling those. We want to do all we can to try to minimize that. Alcoholism and addiction rates just way up. I've got some clients who have, they had their really big buttons from AA for the extended lengths of time they had gone, and they're back to their 1-day buttons and their 2-day buttons, really struggling to stay alcohol or drug free right now. And then this is where I was saying, I know some of you deal with this very directly, domestic abuse, elder abuse, child abuse, because of those short fuses, because we're just so together, because nobody's looking. We know that more and more of this is happening. So that comes back to, how do we reach out to each other, all the people around us, all of our friends, our neighbors, keep those things going. I was talking to someone who, just to talk to her, she's been down. And it's been hard to, if I try to say something that sounds too positive, she just hangs up on me. So that wasn't been working. So what could we do? And she was in Walmart one day trying to find an ingredient for a recipe that she just couldn't find. And a friend walked up and she said that she couldn't even describe what a lift that was to be face to face with that friend. And they just walked around Walmart for an extended period of time, just talking, realizing that both of them had been feeling very isolated. And now they talk to each other every day because they realize how much that helped and how much that picked them up. So the other thing we wanted to talk about today was, how do you care for your team? Because I know a lot of you are part of a team and maybe even leading a team through these times, and that it's difficult. So I want to kind of reframe that way a little bit. And of course, we're going to talk a bit specifically about COVID and the vaccines. Just to kind of put it in a bigger context than I think the regular media is sharing right now. There are currently 69 vaccines in human trials, and 20 of those are either on the market or in final phases. But we don't hear about all of them because they're probably not going to all make their way to the United States. So there are a number of on the market vaccines in China and in India and in South America. And so there are other places where Russia, other places where vaccines are being created for their populations of people. Now, the vaccines we're hearing about, the two that are already on the market, are Pfizer. That's the one that's 3 weeks apart and has to be kept in a very deep freeze kind of condition. Then there's Moderna, that has to be frozen, and it's 4 weeks apart. And sounds like many of you have had one or the other of these. But now, in a couple weeks, the 26th, the FDA is going to look at, and this date is wrong, it's February 26th, that the FDA is going to look at the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Now that one is just one dose. And so I'm sure you've been hearing, many of you were talking about that with the 2-dose vaccines, the first dose makes your immune system recognize and start really amping up to fight this vaccine. The second dose has an already active immune system get a jolt to get even more active. And when that happens, because your immune system is really punched to work hard, you get a lot of flu-like symptoms. And a lot of people are experiencing that with the second dose. So the Johnson & Johnson vaccine will bring about an option for just 1 dose. And so that might allow really large mass immunizations of whole communities rather than having to wait in line for you to reach a certain priority level. So that's coming soon. The Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine is already approved in many parts of the world. There's a US end stage trial that's expected to end anytime that is just double checking whether the second dose of this vaccine needs to be a full dose or if it can be a half a dose. And as soon as that information's available, then AstraZeneca is going to go to the FDA, to the advisory committee. And we anticipate that we'll have those doses. And then Novavax is in its British trial results are out or coming out very soon. US trial is just finishing. So within weeks, we should have 5 vaccines in the United States. And some of these are easier to mass produce than others. And so the US pre-purchased at least 100 million doses of each of these. And now they're working hard to purchase even more doses. And each of these is making these facilities where they can mass produce their vaccine. So if you've not yet gotten your vaccine, or your team has not yet gotten their vaccine and they feel like, the doses are almost used up, there's a lot of hope here, because there are hundreds of millions of doses of vaccines, both of the ones that we've already been using, because there are more of those coming, as well as all of these new vaccines that will soon be out. And we're going to talk a lot about that today at 4, if anyone's interested. So I put in the chat and at the bottom of this slide how to get into my 10-minute weekly update on just sort of what's the new science and the new data coming out around COVID and vaccines, and around sort of life and COVID.
And we can put that link on our GAIN page.
Okay. So then I had mentioned purpose before. I want to pull that back in. This is before COVID. I think these numbers would be much more dramatic now. But before COVID, a big Harvard trial found that 96% of executives feel burned out at work. And I know some of you are in executive level positions. There's a lot of stress. It's always been a stressful spot to be in. And then you consider all of the new challenges around COVID. I can only imagine those burnout rates. That trial or that study found that over 50% of the workforce is actively seeking other employment. And right now we've got a lot of people who aren't employed because of COVID and are seeking employment. So we've got a lot of people feeling some level of desperation for meaningful work. 67% of the workforce is disengaged. And boy, we've kind of talked about this, how much harder to stay engaged now that we're all working from home with all the distractions and we can't really have those face-to-face interactions that we normally have. And this I found really interesting. 9 out of 10 professionals said they would sacrifice 23% of their salary to have meaningful work in place of what they have now. Now, you all are in positions where you're very much service providers, care providers, probably for populations that you care about deeply. So the percentages in the gained group may be a lot lower, but I would still imagine some of us don't feel completely fulfilled by what we're doing. And when we don't, then that has a lot of negative health repercussions. Your immune system isn't as strong. You don't feel as good overall healthy. Your stress response is overactive. You're feeling more stressed by things. And then the heart conditions and the diabetes and the high blood pressure and all of those things are relevant. So as a team member and a team leader, how can you think about the people that you work with and whether they're finding that fulfillment, or if just a few little tweaks maybe would help them find that? Because I love this quote: people who labor all their lives but have no purpose to direct their thoughts and impulses toward are wasting their time even when hard at work. So it's not how hard you work, how many hours you work, how much you work, but is it going towards something that brings you fulfillment? And when you look, this, you'd think this was written today because it kind of fits today's times. This was written in AD 121. That's a while back. And so if that was an issue then, just imagine that we've struggled as people, we've struggled with this through all of time. So back to the self-care now in the context of your teammates. So you've got your own self, but what can teams do to support each other to make sure that everybody knows the kinds of things that can help? So I know several places when the weather, I look out the window because it's gross out, but when the weather allows, they're on the phone or they're on Zoom, but they're moving, they're walking while they're meeting, or they're doing some purposeful stretching and movement in the middle of their meeting to get everybody out of their chair for a little bit. Having times when the group comes together and just relax, whether it's like a guided relaxation sort of thing, or the group is working together silently with just some quiet music in the background, just to kind of pull everybody together. So look at this list and think about the ways you can move this into your team environment and do a better job of caring for each other and helping each other through the stress that we're all experiencing right now. So I just wanted to talk about how, just quickly, what I do and how I pull these things together in case you know anybody. Again, I'm finding these people that have had a very successful career and they're putting all of their energy into their succession plan and reaching those last minute goals before they leave. And on Friday, they have the big retirement party and everybody's there and it's a huge celebration. And on Monday, it's crickets. Nobody needs them anymore. Nobody's calling. The business is still happening without them, which can be such a slap to your heart. And now what? And so I'm finding in that situation that too many people seemed healthy, and now their health is declining rapidly. And I encourage you to think about people, that have retired within the last 10 years. How many have experienced this rapid health decline, or maybe aren't even with us anymore? And no one would have anticipated that. Divorced, they're calling it the gray divorce, but divorce rates in people over 50 are skyrocketing. One of the things that drew me to this was the rise in suicide rates in boomer men in particular. So some level of despair and total loss of self when they're no longer in their position that brought them so much fulfillment. And then declining relationships. I've had very successful people cry before this even happens, but just thinking about which relationship. So, sometimes you feel like somebody wants you for breakfast, somebody wants to meet you for lunch, somebody wants to meet you after work, somebody wants dinner, somebody wants your weekend. You just never get a break. It never slows down. And then, your social circle is very full. And then you retire and you realize all of those people were at work, and they're still at work, and they're still very socially active, and you're not part of that anymore. And none of those relationships were long-term relationships. So trying to help people prepare for that and figure out, if you want those to be long-term relationships, how are we going to make that happen? Because it's not going to happen as naturally as it did when you could just grab that person and go to lunch. And so we focus on health, purpose, that transition, what's it going to look like, so that retirement or whatever comes next is fun and exciting. I've had people move their retirement closer once they can see what it looks like, and they realize who they're going to be and how they're going to be in retirement, and they get excited about it. So this is my current method to try to address this, break it down into 4 phases. So that meaningful purpose piece, who are you going to be, that mentally, socially active piece, the risk mitigation. Our healthcare system right now is very reactive. Something happens and we swoop in and do our best to take care of you, but we're not preventing that thing from happening. So I spend a lot of time on that. And then overall health, just making sure that your healthcare team has all of the correct information before they ever make a decision about you. And with the fast pace of healthcare right now, a lot of bad decisions are being made because the doctors just don't have the full picture before they make those decisions. So I apparently talked really fast, Nikki, because here we are.
That's okay, Michelle, because I think there are probably some questions or some
Good.
points that people
Okay.
might want to follow up on. So at this point, we'll go ahead and open it up for questions or comments or thoughts to share. So please just feel free to unmute yourself or drop a question in the chat, because that was a lot of wonderful information. And I will say, I did have one question, just because I think this is something that I've heard quite a bit, that consistency on sleep times is important, like kind of trying to get to bed, which I know I fail at miserably, getting to bed at the same time, getting up at the same time. Is that helpful in creating a better sleep pattern?
And I know there are people who are exceptions to that, but they're rare. Most people, it's just sort of like we need to program our bodies. We need that structure of this is our sleep time and this is our wake time. And we need to give ourselves the grace of that whole, 7 to 9 hours, 10 hours, whatever your body needs. I've, being in the healthcare professions and in academia, I know students who would go on 2 hours of sleep, and you could tell it really impacted their overall brain function. It impacted their personality. It's tough to try to survive on too little.
I'd like to comment about exploration of volunteer opportunities. When I was the director of the Office on Aging, we had a program called the Retired and Senior Volunteer Program. And what that did was give people an opportunity to meet with someone who was aware of a huge, wide range of volunteer opportunities within the community that allowed people to explore new things, to connect with new groups of people and do meaningful things. And I will never forget, one morning we came to the office. I literally cry every time I hear about this. And we had a message on the machine that thanked us for what we had done for connecting this man with a volunteer opportunity. And he said it gave him a reason to get up in the morning. So people can experience really new things and create new meaning in their life. So pardon me for crying, but I never, every time I think about that, I realize how important this was to people, to everyone. And there still is a volunteer office within Harford County, and their purpose is to maintain literally a roster of all the volunteer opportunities that are available. And you can find something, or they will help you find a variety of things to try that can create new meaning and purpose in your lives.
Oh, that is beautiful. I'm sure you all have heard of the Eden alternative, which in my mind, and I guess it's just maybe my age and stage in my career, that's what first opened my eyes to this concept that we all need to be needed. And so Eden Alternative was started, I think, in St. Louis in nursing homes, where started bringing in animals and plants and different ways for people to have responsibilities throughout the facility. And so it might be to pet an animal or to feed an animal, but then you get to kind of pet that animal. It might be to cultivate the tomato plants. There was one woman who she just kept the African violet alive because she was bedbound and there wasn't a lot else she could do, but that African violet meant a lot to her. And one funny story, a woman who refused to get out of her wheelchair for physical therapy, she just didn't want to, but they brought a baby chick into the facility and she was so afraid that the cat or the dog would get the baby chick that she put the chick into her wheelchair and pushed it around. So suddenly she's out and she's walking, which is what they wanted her to do all along. Her pain levels came down, her just kind of her mental, her outlook improved. And even once this thing was like a whole rooster, she still pushed it all around in her wheelchair. So Carol, I think you're onto something huge with that. Everybody needs their reason, their thing to do to help someone else.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Michelle. Again, we have recorded, and I am going to go ahead and stop the recording now. But we will be